May I speak in the name of God, beyond us, beside us, and within us. A couple of weekends ago, while some of you were doing the unconscious bias training here with Joy, I attended a 3-day experiential workshop on the topic of shame. 30 of us, all presenting our NHS COVID passes and our negative test results, met together in a converted laundry in South London, a large clean space where the walls had been painted pure bright white, the colour of innocence, purity and resurrection. On the first day of our workshop, we learnt about the modern understanding of shame, its different forms and sources, its pervasiveness in the human personality, its insidiousness, and how we can carry a deep-seated sense of shame in our bodies as well as in our minds. And we reflected together on the extent of shame in our own lives and how much it influences our way of being in the world, how we had been shamed and who we had shamed. For as we learn, shame is very readily weaponized, and if we have shame, then we are likely to shame. And we talked and shared our stories, and in doing so created bonds within our group. On the second day, we sat in a large circle around the walls of our white room so we could all see each other. And then we went slowly around the circle, with each of us whispering in turn in the ear of the person next to us, "What are you pretending?" And we each responded to this challenging question by speaking aloud into the whole group and dropping one of the veils that we habitually hide behind in public life. And then we moved around the circle a second time. "What are you pretending?" And we each dropped another veil. And then we went around the circle for a third time. "What are you pretending?" And everyone peeled off yet another deeper layer of our social selves, and then we sat in our white room and looked at each other in light of what we had all revealed. And then we stood together and we embarked upon something known as a shame circle. As we felt moved, we stepped into the circle and we disclosed to the whole group of 30 people something about which we felt shame. And if what someone else said resonated with us personally, then we also stepped into the circle to join that person. And then the people standing inside the circle lifted their eyes and met the gaze of the people standing with them. And then everyone applauded us, and we applauded ourselves. And then we stepped back to the white walls and allowed space for the next disclosure. And this continued for about 90 minutes. And from the very beginning, the gravity and seriousness of what people revealed to the group was staggering. Sometimes we were the victims of acts done to us that had filled us with shame and distorted our identities and our lives for decades afterwards. And sometimes we were the perpetrators of unpleasant acts against other people, often as a result of turning our own shame into a weapon, for if we have shame, then we are likely to shame. And as you might imagine, sexual experiences and behaviours featured prominently. The shame of things that had been done to us, with or without our consent, of things we had done to others, with or without their consent. And in this group of 30 people, I was the only man, and it was both dreadful and tremendous for me as a man to bear supportive witness to the extent of sexual abuse and rape by men that had blighted the lives of so many within this group of brave and beautiful women. And after these remarkable rituals, our homework on the evening of the second day was to write ourselves a letter from our shame, in which our shame thanked us for keeping it so safe and so sacred, but it was now time to lay it down. And when I wrote myself a letter from my shame, I was astonished how quickly a distinctive voice emerged that seemed to draw together quite different episodes and areas of my life over many, many years, and how keen its insistence was to please stop holding on to my shame and to let it rest. And we met together on the third day. Other people had undergone a similar transformation. And it was extraordinary how, in light of all the devastating revelations of the previous day, how bright and joyful we all were, and people danced and smiled together that morning. And then our guide on this journey, who was a psychosexual therapist called Carolyn Cowan, who sometimes speaks here at St. James's as part of the events held by Alternatives, taught us about techniques and strategies for continuing to put down our shame, for being more conscious of when it was triggered, to stop drinking the poison of our shame, which is often so horribly, temptingly familiar to us. And then at the end of the third day, we left our wonderful white room and returned to our daily lives. It was disconcerting and formative and joyous to have undergone this strange experience as a man and as a priest, affiliated to the church, which has been itself such a huge locus of shame production for so many people, but that was also now part funding me to be at this workshop, to see what I might learn by participating in this creative corporate act of confession and absolution. We hear it again in our gospel reading today, the stridently shaming voice of John the Baptist, telling us what a brood of vipers we are. How pitiful are our feeble attempts to do good. How far we still have to go to be worthy. And the impending threat of the one who is coming to sweep us wretched creatures into the unquenchable fire. Historically, the church has had a field day with readings like this. Like most areas of theology, moral theology has its popular fashions. Over the past 2,000 years, it has oscillated between emphasizing the joy and freedom of participating in the love of God, or dwelling upon the human propensity to do evil and our need to avoid sin. The doctrine of hell was not a big feature of the early church. It wasn't until the High Middle Ages that Judgment Day went from being a joyful day of deliverance to being seen as a day of damnation for the corrupt masses, and the collective imagination went wild, envisaging the lurid torments of the place below. In the second half of the 19th century, the theologian F.W. Faber wrote that a person should think 10 times of heaven for every thought of hell. But significant stretches of Christian history, the church has chosen to emphasize the torments of hellfire rather than the joys of the heavenly kingdom, on the basis that, in terms of keeping congregations in good moral order, the stick worked better than the carrot. John Lonsdale, who was consecrated Bishop of Lichfield in 1843, was reported to have admitted in private conversation, "I have a hope for men beyond this life, but I'm afraid it would not do to preach it. People are careless enough as it is." But throughout the 19th century, the doctrine of hell fell gradually out of fashion. There was an increasing awareness of the effects of heredity and environment upon the formation of human personality, and the possibilities for reform and redemption. The notion of eternal punishment came to seem morally indefensible and inconsistent with contemporary ideas of progress and humanitarianism. Ideas of the afterlife became more organic and evolutionary, and the church began to lay more emphasis on the hope of reward rather than on the fear of punishment, of sin as a property of unjust social systems as well as individuals, of salvation as something both personal and political that was discoverable in this life as well as in the next, and that perhaps the best measure of our spiritual progress is the intensity with which we work for the present-day salvation of our neighbour. But shame casts a long shadow, and we're still in the foothills of what it might mean to create a less shaming church. In her book on shame and the church, published last year, Sally Nash advocated that there are 5 practices to help promote a shame-resistant or shame-transforming church. First, for church leaders to talk openly about shame. Second, for there not to be a hierarchy of sin and shame. Third, for corporate sin to be examined and confessed. Fourth, that the public failure of Christian people be responded to with grace and humility. And lastly, that the church should welcome those whose stories include their shame. This is all very pertinent indeed, as the Church of England continues its consultation on human sexuality and relationships, called Living in Love and Faith. We will run our own version of this course at St James's early next year. Starting on Sunday the 9th of January, we will meet in the church at 12:30 to explore topics of gender, sexuality, sex and relationships. Each week we will introduce a topic for conversation and hear a Gospel of Our Lives story from a member of the St James's community. And then we will move into small groups for further sharing and conversation. To help establish a brave and comfortable space for exploring these important and sensitive topics, we're asking you to sign up in advance for the 5-week course. Small groups, including facilitators, will be formed on the first week, and then we'll stay in the same small groups for the duration of the course, and the church will be closed to other visitors while these groups are taking place. At the end of the course, there's the opportunity to submit feedback to the Church of England on the topics we have explored together as part of the Church's discernment about a way forward in its teachings on sexuality, relationships, and marriage. This will be an in-person course in the church building. We may subsequently offer it online, but we're going to do it in person first to see what lessons we might learn before we venture to offer an online version. And of course, we'll bear in mind the ever-changing and unpredictable landscape of the COVID pandemic. But for the time being, that is our plan, and we'll see how things stand in the new year. So if you're able to attend in person from the 9th of January, we invite you to please sign up now to take part. You can find a link on the website that will take you to a sign-up page on Church Suite. And don't worry, we won't be having a shame circle, and no one will whisper in your ear, "What are you pretending?" Though as we now hold silence for a few moments together, perhaps I may gently invite you to ponder in the quietness of your heart what your own answer to that searching question might be. Amen.